Donald Trump loves chaos, but only when it is by his hand and by his design. Today, chaos of another kind is ripping through his White House, and CNN just dropped a major bombshell that reveals it is a house that is deeply divided. I will have that CNN report for you in just a minute, a report that includes the phrases heated confrontation and considering resigning, but first I think some context is important. In one corner we have Pam Bondi, Attorney General and head of the Justice Department, who is under fire these days for completely mishandling the Epstein files. She took a traditional path to Trump's White House by serving the same role for the state of Florida. And in the other corner, we have Dan Bongino, who holds the title of Deputy Director of the FBI, despite his last job being that of MAGA influencer and broadcaster. Let's see what he said about the Epstein files before he joined Team Trump, when he was untethered and free to speak his MAGA mind, and after.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
There is more coming on the Epstein files. Listen, I know this is a hot potato for folks. I totally understand. My comments were clear. I'm not paid for my opinions anymore. I work for the taxpayer now. I'm paid on evidence. That's it. We do have video. It's not the greatest video in the world. I don't want to set expectations on fire. However, the video does show in that specific block that he goes in, made a phone call. You'll see 12 hours of guards going to basically check on him, come back. You'll see no one really comes out in that bay, in that area, than him. There's no one in there. When you combine that with the other evidence we will be releasing in the coming weeks, we're still finalizing some of the products. I think it's pretty clear. However, as I've clearly indicated in some of my tweets on my official account, listen, investigations, if new information surfaces in the future on any of these cases, we're always open. I'm just telling you, there's nothing there in the file.
So civilian broadcaster Dan, full of all that MAGA patriot rage, said we need to keep the heat on the Epstein case. But then FBI Dan says, I'm not paid for my opinions on this hot potato anymore, signaling that he's been neutered. Well, these two faces of Dan were likely to collide one day, and it appears today is that day. Here's CNN to break down how MAGA Dan came back to life and is creating problems for Bondi and Trump.
All right, this breaking news. Sources tell CNN that Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino has told people that he's considering resigning amid a major clash between the FBI and DOJ over the continued fallout from the release, or lack thereof, of the Jeffrey Epstein memo. Joining us right now on the phone is CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, what more are you learning?
Yeah, Fred, it remains to be seen if he actually follows through with what he has told colleagues. But what we do know is that Dan Bongino has told people he is considering resigning as the deputy director of the FBI over the fallout that has continued ever since this memo was released last Sunday. The anger inside the MAGA base has only continued to grow instead of going away, as some officials inside hoped it would. And now our colleagues, along with Christian Holmes, Hannah Rabinowitz, and Evan Perez, we're hearing that he's considering resigning after they had this heated confrontation with the Attorney General Pam Bondi over the handling of this earlier this week. And basically there was a meeting at the White House where the FBI Director, Kash Patel, was there, the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles. They were questioned about whether they were part of a story, that there was basically some infighting over how this came out, and this memo that said we're not going to be releasing any more information related to Jeffrey Epstein. And I should note that we are told Bongino denied leaking any story to this outlet that it was reported on. but there has been a lot of fighting between Attorney General Pam Bondi specifically and the leadership over at the FBI over who's to blame in this situation. I think the context here is obviously Dan Bongino, Kash Patel. They came from this MAGA world where they themselves had pushed a lot of questions about the so-called client list that Epstein had beforehand. And now the MAGA base is just not pleased or satisfied with what they've said in this memo that came out unsigned from the Justice Department and the FBI on Sunday night. So what we are told is Dan Bongino did not show up to work today, that he is essentially not there out of protest. But whether or not he actually follows through on this still remains to be seen. We're still reporting that out. But it just speaks to the backlash that the White House is very much feeling and understanding after this memo came out, despite President Trump the other day in the cabinet room asking, who still cares about this? One thing we know is the MAGA base certainly does.
Are we witnessing the moment the MAGA wall finally cracks? And not from the usual external attacks that Trump has long deflected with ease, but from within his own inner circle. The Epstein case has become way too big to just move along by flooding the media with distractions. This was once just one of many controversies brewing, but has now taken center stage with a cover-up and internal dissent, and the blunders by Attorney General Bondi have only made it worse. This isn't just palace intrigue, it is a public unraveling. The clash between Bondi and Bongino shows that Trump's house of loyalty is fracturing under its own scandalous weight, and his once untouchable stronghold is finally starting to fall apart. At this point, the calls for accountability will only increase, as if people are listening to 2023 Dan Bongino, who said, "We need to keep the heat on the Epstein case." I'm Dan, thank you for watching. Please leave your thoughts below with a comment, and let's continue to occupy democracy together.